I'm very, very excited for this one. As I was telling Isaac, like basically Futurespaces is just an excuse in some ways for me just to like learn and dive into the things I'm super interested in. I'm super interested in experiential hospitality. Isaac and I had a wonderful walk and talk through the streets of Santa Monica. And now we get to get the same stuff, but with visuals. So with that, Isaac, I will hand it over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Josh. And thanks everybody for joining. So yeah, my name is Isaac French, and I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen now, if that's all right. Let me pull this up. All right, everybody can see my screen?
Yes, yes.
All right, so this is me and my wife, Helen. We have two little boys. We need an updated photo, Lucas and Ezra. And I'm going to talk to you about experiential hospitality and just tell you some stories and hopefully inspire you. So 4 years ago, I was 24 years old. I had $20,000 of savings and a dream. Less than a year later, I opened the doors to my first micro resort, and then I lost almost everything 2 weeks later. Airbnb shut me down without any warning or explanation. But a $950 Instagram giveaway turned that disaster into a breakthrough. And a year later, I had a record-breaking exit. And now I believe we're in what is the gold rush of experiential hospitality, micro resorts, landscape hotels. There are urban concepts for these unique stays as well. And I want to show you some of those opportunities. So first, let's play a short video of Live Oak Lake. So there it is. So 7 cabins, Nordic inspired, around the lake on 5 acres in Texas. So I'm just going to really blaze through the story here, but I think hopefully it's interesting and has some takeaways. So again, I mentioned I was 24 years old and just started looking at Zillow. I had this dream. I was self-employed as a bookkeeper, and I find this property one morning that had been listed hours earlier. You can see it's really just a jungle with this little muddy cow pond in the middle of it. But when I walked on site, I immediately had goosebumps and knew this was the place. Why? I don't know, but something in the land was speaking to me. And there were 3 or 4 of these massive live oak trees, which are kind of the flagship tree here in Texas. I could also kind of envision this lake being dug out and, just beautiful. I could see these reflections in the water and this transportive vibe. So I spent 10 years of my childhood growing up in the Pacific Northwest. And that really impacted me and my sense of taste, and both architecturally, but also landscapes. And I wanted to bring that vibe to Texas. So I, with $19,000 to my name, got this 5 acres under contract. And the next day I was, the first 3 days I was on site, just walking every square inch of the property, trying to understand exactly what the best use of it would be. I had this dream, but I was trying to let the land guide what that vision became, how it manifested. Ended up getting a bank loan, raised a little bit of capital for the additional amount that I needed. But it was a whirlwind. Again, I wasn't necessarily a bankable customer to them. I didn't have any experience, but I had this absolute conviction that this needed to exist. And I like to believe the universe conspires for those that are on a mission. And so the day after we closed, I was on site with a chainsaw, clearing brush, and with my buddies, and lining up subcontractors. So that first, it was a wild ride. That was one of our wettest springs on record. I was like figuring this stuff out as we went. I did have some construction experience under my belt as a kid growing up. But I mean, there were a lot of just phone calls, DIY, YouTube, and it was a wild spring because it was so wet. We were trying to put utilities underground and get roads in and permitting and pour slabs. And I also built a $750,000 spec home about 6 miles down the road, which ended up selling. I built and sold that in 5 months, profited around 200,000 from that, and parlayed all of that into this project as well, because we ended up going over budget because there were so many little details, and I have this pretty demanding design aesthetic that I wanted to maintain, and I didn't want to compromise on that. So yeah, this picture kind of symbolizes the entire first 6 months of the project. It was muddy in every sense, and it was just a slog to get through. There were a million reasons to give up, but we didn't. And before I take too much credit to myself, I have an amazing family, set of friends, and just, you know, a bunch of subcontractors that obviously couldn't have done this without. Truck's getting stuck. Here we are. We're going above ground. We're framing these. And I literally, I mean, to give you a sense of the kind of bootstrapping we're talking about, I had napkin drawings that I paid a $200 to a freelancer from Fiverr to turn into some pretty rustic plans that were totally undetailed. And I was over there on site, you know, 15 hours a day interpreting those plans and guiding the subcontractors, and also kind of value engineering, figuring out how to actually build this project for less than a total fortune. We ended up spending $2.3 million. Took us 9.5 months, which is crazy, start to finish. I mean, literally, the design, the build, everything. Ended up buying a shipping container, with a window, and converting it into a swimming pool right on the edge of the lake. So we ended up digging the lake out, made it beautiful, put a dock in. And then the day before Thanksgiving, or 2 days before Thanksgiving, this is 2021, I step inside one of the cabins to help out one of the contractors installing a spiral staircase. And the ladder slips out from underneath me, and I fall 10 feet on my side. Thank God he held this big piece of steel up by himself that I had been holding for him while he was screwing it in. I broke my pelvis, and that's a really big deal, I figured out. So I landed in the hospital on my back for 7 days, unable to do anything, multiple surgeries. That's all the stainless steel in my pelvis, trying to put it back together. Yeah, ouch is right. So this set me back a little bit. I was on crutches for the final 3 months of the project, but was over there nonetheless. And again, 9.5 months after breaking ground, we opened the doors to Live Oak Lake. And it was fantastic. This is January of 2022. To launch the property, I brought all my family together. I have 9 siblings, and, you know, grandparents and cousins and aunts and uncles from all over the country. We came together and did like a mini family reunion. It was awesome. So it was also a great way to just test drive the place, figure out the friction points, and you know, the punch list after the punch list, so to speak. And this is Live Oak Lake. So we had this tremendous start. The first 2 weeks, we're crushing it. I mean, again, I like to think of this magical vibe that we created that was the result of all these little tiny details. Like here, for instance, the signage, like nothing went unnoticed. And just these thousands and thousands of little details that were intentionally crafted with a cohesive vision in mind that came together. And really did create this transportive moment where people all the time would tell us, like, when we came through the gate, it felt like we were going into a different world. And that was like the best compliment ever. But like I mentioned, 2 weeks after we launched, I wake up one morning, I'll never forget it, and my entire account on Airbnb is suspended. And I get on the phone with customer service, and they're like, I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can actually do about this because that's a different department and we can't touch it. And so I just waited. And I mean, literally, I've spent 2.3 million. I'm 24 and my entire business is shut down. I'm recently married. I've borrowed a bunch of, you know, almost all of that, other people's money. Terrible, terrible feeling. I like to say now, though, that was the biggest blessing in disguise along my entire journey because it caused me to think outside the box. So what I mean by that is I immediately, that talk about first principles thinking could no longer, take anything for granted. So I was like, where do we get bookings? How do we advertise on our own? So kind of overnight, we threw up a direct bookings website with a booking engine. And then I found this travel influencer. I met this person and she told me, just a random coincidence, like, oh, you should partner with a travel influencer on Instagram and see if they'll run a giveaway. So we did that. And 4 days, she ran a giveaway right in the middle of the suspension. 7 days after that, we had $40,000 of bookings and like $5,000 followers from scratch. And so that was my eureka moment. And I was like, we're going all in on direct. Then, as fate would have it, we got restored on Airbnb right after that giveaway. And so now we could list back on the main platform, but they took a back seat. So we went all in on direct. We partnered with influencers. We created a ton of our own content. Our property was very Instagrammable, as you can see. And so there were all these perfect moments that here's the shipping container pool that people just wanted to document, and that also just worked really well for our own storytelling. I'm checking the chat. Did they ever give you a reason? No, they did not. They basically told me, we found it seemed suspicious that you had a bunch of family members staying there, because I told you about the mini family reunion. So all my family made legit reservations, because again, it was also going to help us get some initial reviews, but they made legit reservations. Somehow the algorithm flagged that. That's the best that I kind of pieced together. The crazy thing is 6 months later, after we were already at 75% of all bookings coming direct, thank God, because of that first incident, it happened again. We got suspended. That time was for 12 days. And that time it didn't seem like it would ever come back. They were like, I'm sorry, but this is, we actually sent you an email that you never responded to. And until you respond, this is never going to be restored. They never sent me the email. I'm not trying to trash talk Airbnb. Funny little story. I just met the co-founder. Josh and I were talking offline a few weeks ago, one of the co-founders of Airbnb. And so I kind of had a little bit of fun rubbing this in, telling him about it, because I've been pretty vocal about this. And my mission now, unabashedly, is to arm the rebels of this new generation of experiential stays. Because here's the truth. If you invest in the design, in the experience, like I did with Live Oak Lake, then you have this gold mine for content. And so the way I see it, you'd be irresponsibly stupid not to capitalize on that and create content, build a following, and then use that to funnel to your own engine. So we're making 15% extra profit on the direct bookings. We can't ever be deplatformed. We also have a relationship with the guests, so they're coming back multiple times a year, and we don't have a data wall between them. The property is incredible, so they're telling their friends and family and bringing them back with them. And really, that's how I think about social media. It's a megaphone for word of mouth marketing, and word of mouth always has been and always will be the most valuable channel, because it's just leveraging trust at scale. And so that's also why the influencers that we partnered with early on were so incredibly valuable from a business standpoint, because we're leveraging their trust, and there's a big arbitrage there. Now, there's a lot we could say. I could teach hours worth of discussions about this, but yeah, it is a little bit of a minefield if you don't know what you're doing in terms of influencer partnerships, because there's a lot out there that just aren't the right fit or kind of have fake audiences and whatnot. So you got to be careful. But this is the whole property from the air. You can see the cabins, you can see the lake, the commons area. We ended up having we were inundated with these requests for family reunions and corporate retreats and micro weddings. I couldn't believe the level of the demand for group travel. And this is also, really coming out of the COVID bust. So it's 2022, getting into 2023, and people are just in general fired up and wanting to get outside. It was also a great model because the location we chose near Waco is, right smack dab in the middle of what's called the Texas Triangle. That's 23 million people within 2.5 hours in all directions. And they're all they have this desire for experiences, for nature. And to be honest, as a Texan myself, it's not the prettiest state and it's also a huge state. So if you want to go somewhere really beautiful and cool, you usually have to travel like a whole day to get there. This was at most a 2 hour, driving distance. And so it's perfect for these 2-3 day vacations, which by the way, is another huge trend in travel that we're seeing. Instead of like 1 or 2 big vacations a lot of people used to take, we're seeing a ton more demand for like these 1, 2, 3 night stays that are shorter, closer, but that are, again, travelers are very discerning and they're looking for, a certain aesthetic. And that's another advantage I had. These cabins are totally unlike anything that you would have found, at least to this point. Nordic architecture has kind of become ubiquitous everywhere, but in Texas, it really didn't exist very much. And so just creating this, again, cohesive vibe with where the landscape, the architecture, the interiors, the programming, the activities, all were seamlessly woven together into this magical experience. Of course, there's a hospitality component as well. And so, we only had 2 part-time employees running this entire gig. And so it was highly profitable for me. That first year we grossed just at $1 million and net 550,000. And we were 95% occupied, 80% of all bookings coming direct. But part of that was the hospitality that we did incorporate was very intentional. So for instance, the welcome, the messaging, the journey, the guest journey from pre-arrival all the way to arrival, every message thought out, and the way it was written, like the copywriting, incredibly thoughtful and personalized. It was anti-formal across the board. And, at every touch point, trying to establish that strong, firm connection with the guest on an emotional level. So you do all these things on site to, craft the vibe, but then you got to put your heart and soul into it and they got to feel it. So I'll give you a couple examples. I realized people love to see their name handwritten. So I developed this simple process for the cleaners, and they would leave a handwritten note with fresh baked cookies with our own recipe from one of the local bakers that we partnered with. The cleaners would pick up the cookies. The bakers had access to the property management software, which automated everything, so they could see how many to produce each day. The cleaners would leave that with the Topo Chico, with the handwritten note, and it was just, under $10, this little welcome gift that is, in many cases, and other experiences that you may have, kind of an overlooked moment. And yet I capitalized on it as this is a way to make the guests feel like I really care, and I myself am the one here. You wouldn't believe how many notes in the guest books and reviews that people left where they mentioned little details like that, or something as simple as the user manual. So you'll go to a lot of Airbnbs, right? And they have like this 10-page document, or at least 2-page document, like laminated, Times New Roman, blah, 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 just a bunch of rules. Like, you can't do this, you got to do this, make sure when you leave, you do this, and you got to check that, or else you might get penalized for this. It's like, no, we're not doing that. We do need to have some education, but let's make it fun. So what I did is I took like the user manuals for all these fancy appliances we had, and the hot tub and the container pool and speed oven and all the things that the guests were going to use and need while they were there. And I boiled I wish I had ChatGPT at the time. I didn't. I boiled all of that down to like 2 or 3 pages of fun to read instructions if you wanted to use appliances, for instance. But that was layered in with our personal story, the story of the property, our recommendations for the area. So it was very warm, like a coffee table book almost, and beautifully designed. I built it all on Canva. It took me probably 60 hours. Again, this was one of those like forgotten touch points that is typically a friction point with the guest, and I kind of turned it around and created this emotional connection through it. So these are just little examples of some of the details that contribute to this experiential hospitality. So to put a bow on this story, we got approached by a ton of like institutional investors. We couldn't say no at one point. We ended up selling for $7 million 2 years after building, or less than 2 years after building. So $1 million a key, hundreds of thousands of followers, and the writing's on the wall. These guys see this is the future by and large for the kind of resorts, retreats that our generation especially is craving, these experience-driven kind of boutique stays. So I'm going to show you a few other examples, because since then I've done a bunch of other projects and been involved in a lot of projects. So A friend of mine, Brian, has a brand called Flow Home. This is cool. So he basically had an idea to rethink houseboats. When I think of houseboat, I kind of have a negative connotation, at least as a Texan, like down at the lake and kind of the redneck, hillbilly, patched together. There's a certain culture around it that's not desirable. Well, this guy, again, first principles thinking, basically created his own little mini yacht, and he built this thing from scratch for a couple $100,000. He's in Baltimore, but it's beautiful. And here's a cool thing. So some of these cities, a lot of these cities are banning Airbnbs, or they have incredibly strict regulations. Well, because he is on the water, he totally bypasses all STR regulations. So he's got 360 harbor views in Washington, D.C., Annapolis, Baltimore, all these eastern markets now. And even if something does come along and something changes, these are self-propelled. He can just pick up and leave and go somewhere else if he wants to. It's an incredible experience. No one else is doing it. He's taken it to the next level. He just bought his first marina. So he's verticalizing at every level now. So he literally controls the entire experience. He's doing a floating pickleball court, sauna, wellness space, coffee shop. It's insane. And the numbers would blow your mind. Again, highly experiential, highly Instagrammable, and anybody can do this. All right, here's another example. A friend of mine, Chris, up in the Adirondacks, 4 hours north of New York City. He's got a great story. And by the way, if you don't follow me on socials, you should, because I share, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, because I share these stories. And again, like such a fantastically like rags to riches, scraping the bottom of the barrel. His wife got in an accident, and they got a small insurance payout of $28,000. With that money, he bought 5 acres, 6 hours from where he lived, up in way upstate New York, designed and built this A-frame, but had a really unique feature, this slide-out bed, okay? This cost $800 in materials. Get some rubber gasket, the metal track that you see, and a garage door opener so it would slide in and out so that you could see the stars. The place absolutely exploded. 300 million impressions total since launching a few years ago. Featured in pretty much every architectural magazine. And he built this thing himself. As soon as he launched this one, he built this tree house with a suspension bridge entrance. Now, you're going to love this story. He was staying the night there right after they launched, and to kind of like soft launch and work out the kinks. And he heard this thump, thump, thump down below on the first floor one morning. And he walked downstairs, and there's this buck, this deer, that is ramming its antlers against a glass window. And he's like, I got to fix this problem. And so he had this poetic solution, which was dig out this little pond next to the window so the deer can't get up next to it, put a little dock in. He installed a 40-foot waterfall that's recirculating that feeds into this, and talk about Instagrammable. It's this perfect little moment, again, that kind of created this vibe that was already there, but he was just reinforcing it. Next project, he's now building a mirrored house. And these are like obviously drastically different concepts. And he's fitting all of this into his little 5 acres. This place is insane. I could show you more pictures, but I've got more examples to show you. So Chris is absolutely crushing it. Cliffs at Hocking Hill. So these are great friends of mine in rural Ohio. And great story. Again, the wife had cancer. They have 3 young girls. The husband is a pastor. She overcame the cancer miraculously. They went to Bali for 2 or 3 months just to kind of regroup and recharge, and were so inspired by the hospitality that they experienced there. They came back to the US and were like, we have to create this at home. And so they started looking, and they found this rundown Boy Scout lodge through searching on Craigslist. It's kind of creepy, honestly. And just this huge lodge out in the woods that hadn't been occupied in years. Through maxed out credit cards, a bank loan, seller financing, they were able to acquire it. They're doing the renovation, and trust me, like very, very gifted people, very tasteful in what they were doing. But one day, like 3 months into this journey of renovating the lodge, they're looking over the edge, the cliff, and you can see that it's pretty hilly, and they see this small little rock cliff down below the lodge. A light bulb instantly goes off in Kimball's mind, and he's like, that should be a waterfall. And so, similar to what Chris did, these guys, for a couple tens of thousands of dollars and 3 months of backbreaking work, they dug out the little space below that cliff. They put in a pond liner, a heater, a recirculating pump, and they created this one-of-a-kind heated swimming hole, waterfall heated swimming hole. Again, this place has gone mega viral. They have over 600,000 followers on Instagram. They're renting the lodge for $2,100 a night, and they're 90% occupied in a highly seasonal market. With the profits from this first build and all the attention they were getting, they ended up creating a second water feature out of the sandstone formations. This is in rural Ohio, about an hour outside of Columbus in Hocking Hills. They created the second feature with 3 more bungalows. You can see this is the first feature. Again, absolutely insanely viral. People love it. It's a one-of-a-kind experience. It's not tacky. It's just incredible. And if this doesn't inspire you, I think the through line that I love about these projects is they took a natural feature of the land that was totally overlooked, and they, with creative eyes, reimagined it as something totally one of a kind that anchored the entire experience and the entire aesthetic. And this one happened kind of by accident. All right, Dunlap Hollow is another great example. So this is actually just miles down the road of Cliffs at Hocking Hills, from Cliffs at Hocking Hills, one I just showed you. Another set of friends of mine, and they had this cave on their property. Well, it didn't look like this when they first found it. It was grown over, full of dirt, and there were trees in front of it. But they ended up discovering this one day while hiking. And again, great personal story, won't get into it, but he was an engineer, was burned out from his job, wanted to do something with his hands. So they found this cave. Well, guess what they turned it into? You guessed it. And this might top all of these examples off. When I posted about this on X in January, 40 million people saw this post, and they got $20,000 of bookings in one day. But it's a cool story. And then, from that post, every major, or not every, but almost every major media publication online did stories about it. So, by the way, Twitter is a great place to seed story ideas out there, and journalists kind of lurk and watch and then create more press from that. But they built this thing for $330,000. It's all Gothic interiors, absolutely insanely beautiful. You can see all the natural stone. Of course, they had challenges, and I'm glossing over these, but just like my own story, I mean, in this case, they had to get geological and structural engineers to come in and sign off, which was no big deal. They had 20 gallons of water leaking into the space each day, and so they had to find essentially huge industrial grade dehumidifiers to suck that water out. And they were never going to get rid of it, so they just had to trap it and then suck it out, and that's what they do to this day. Here's a crazy stat on this place. It rents for around $1,400-$1,500 a night. They opened this thing in the end of 2022, so 2.5 years ago. In 2.5 years, they have had exactly one night that was unoccupied. And the wait list, if you try to book this place, it's at least a year out. It's insane. Again, they took this natural feature on their property for a few $100,000, and this, I would argue, is worth, upwards of close to $10 million, honestly. They have 400,000+ followers on Instagram. Now they've created other stays. What's cool about these stories is they took their kind of hallmark signature feature or stay, and maybe it's like a really high entry point, kind of like the last example with that lodge. It's $2,100 a night to stay there. But then they create another feature and have bungalows that you can stay at for $400 or $500 a night. So it's like this, almost like a Tesla model of, starting with the really high-end luxury product, getting the hype, getting the attention, doing fewer things, but doing them much better, and then scaling to accessibility while maintaining this incredible brand. All right, I got to tell you one more story. This actually might be my favorite. This is my own project with my family. So we found my dad is this big train nerd, and I'm almost done, by the way. And a few years ago, up in Idaho, he got a call from the neighbor in the middle of winter. The neighbor's a farmer. He's 85 years old. He needed help shoveling snow off of his barn roof. So my dad goes over there and he sees this, well, except that it was in a barn. Most people wouldn't even know what this was. He knew instantly this was this old rail car. He knew the local history, and he had an incredible vision immediately, like, we need to restore this. So we ended up buying it for $3,000, and 6 months later, this is what we had. My brothers and I did all the work ourselves, except for like the HVAC, but like literally restored every bit of it ourselves. We bought this thing for $3,000. This is in the mountains of Idaho, 2 hours from an interstate or a major city. Ended up being documented on a major TV channel, has become like a world famous destination. This is what it looked like. I'm serious. 20 cats were living in this thing when he found it. It stunk like you can't believe. One of the big, we actually found a photo. This is the car, and we were able to tell because that 306 that you see, we found like this faded out, same marking. Almost all the original paint was gone, but we were able to trace it to that. So we actually have a photo of the day this thing was built in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm sorry, St. Charles, Missouri. And what an incredible story that was just literally, buried in a barn, in a farmer's barn in Idaho. It's a crazy story how it even got in there. Now, here was one of the wildest parts of the whole journey, trying to move this thing. It's 61 feet long. It's the middle of winter. And it was an absolute bear to move, but we did get it. About 10 miles to this little piece of property we had. Then we built this structure around it to shelter it, to kind of make it feel like a depot, like it was inside of a depot. And then literally went to town restoring it meticulously. This is me like hand painting the original lettering onto it. And 6 months later, this is what we had. We opened, this is the inside. I mean, literally meticulously restored every single inch of it inside, reimagined into this incredible accommodation with lodging, with a bedroom, with a lounge area, with a kitchen, a stove. It's also spectacular in winter, and I've stayed there in winter. So anyway, those are some of my projects, some of the stories that I wanted to tell you. And again, to kind of like recap and bring this home, I believe that this is the future of hospitality. People are craving these one-of-a-kind experiences. And what's inspiring to me is that hopefully some of these stories demonstrate anyone can do this. None of us came from hospitality or real estate backgrounds. And I actually think that gave me and all of these stories an advantage, because we were able to create the dream experience that we wanted without the constraints of kind of the traditional orthodoxies. We're also very scrappy too. And so what I like to say is anybody with a dream and a vision that becomes a conviction becomes a magnet for everything they need: guests, capital, everything. And the universe conspires for those people. And you've heard the phrase before, the classic movie line, build it and they'll come. Well, I want to rephrase that just slightly. If you build it and you pour your heart and soul into it, and you absolutely don't compromise on that vision that you have for it, but you see it through, they won't only come, they'll beat your tour down, and you won't be able to keep up with the bookings. And that's what's been demonstrated with our projects. So I hope you all enjoyed that, and I'd love to answer any questions that you have.
All right. I think that's everything I wanted to be. That was perfect. I love it. So we have like a whole bunch of questions that came up in the chat as you were talking. But I think the best way to do this is actually if people feel like they can go on camera and just raise your hand or whatever, just ask yourself. I will say Phil wanted me to ask a question, which is a very specific one, which we'll just use as people gather the strength and courage to ask themselves. How do you handle drinking water and sewage in these remote locations?
So we ended up have to install our own septic systems. So we did an aerobic system, which has like a treatment and lift stations and pumps, and then ends up actually sanitizing the water and sprinklers it. So it actually waters and fertilizes the vegetation. That's one of them. Another one, we did just a traditional system that's underground. Typically with these projects, they're far enough outside of cities that, first of all, the land is a lot cheaper. It's also beautiful and like more nature immersive. But the best part is the regulations are much lighter than if you're going to try to do this anywhere else. But septic is typically the biggest thing that you got to be careful about, because you got to have that engineered and permitted properly. For water, wells. So we'll drill depending on what the water table is, we'll drill sometimes as low as 50 or 60 foot deep well. Sometimes it's 600 feet deep. And, that can range anywhere from 15,000 to upwards of several $100,000. If you're going to spend several $100,000, then you're probably going to want to build not just one, you want to have a whole hotel that can kind of support it, but it totally can be done.
Love it. All right, before people jump in, I'm gonna ask my own questions. So, did you say you were a bookkeeper, like QuickBooks kind of stuff, and then you jumped into this? Like, okay, one, like, what gave you the courage and conviction to think you could pull this off, and then like two, like, how did you do it? Like, you had to bring an architect in at some point, I would imagine, right? Like, no.
Nope.
All right, tell me how it goes. Tell me how it happened.
Creative. I was homeschooled, and my parents did a fantastic job, I think, of kind of inspiring curiosity in us. And so we were doing projects, my siblings and I, from the time we were, literally 5, 6 years old and on. And literally, like, I was running little businesses and kind of spinning things up and learning construction. So we were doing that on the side. Like, we lived on a farm, so we were always building stuff with our hands, like a barn and digging a pond and planting an orchard and that kind of stuff. And then I actually decided in high school, I wanted to learn bookkeeping and specifically tax prep. You're going to laugh at this because I wanted to see how much other people made. Like, that was literally my motivation. So I kind of brought myself through school online to learn accounting and tax, and ended up, but I never wanted to be like an accountant full time, but I ended up basically being an accountant while also like always nurturing this creative aspect. And I've always done art, painting, and drawing on the side. So living in the PNW, like, I was collecting these ideas for these structures and kind of like cultivating my own aesthetic. And I think just moving to Texas and, seeing the opportunity there and kind of the uninspired architecture that was around, I was just like, this is the time, this is the moment. We were coming out of COVID, so I knew there was probably going to be a big push for these kinds of experiences. And I just took the leap. And again, like, the dream began. When I'm the kind of person, you can probably relate. I think a lot of people can relate, but like, if I'm going to go all in on something, I am going all in on it. There's zero half-hearted. And so once I made that decision, it was like, I am going to figure out a way to will this into being. And until I literally get to like drop dead doing it, I'm going to make this happen. And I think people rally behind that. Again, like, finding the financing and all of that, it came together as soon as I was 100% committed. And what I see a lot of people doing is kind of like dabbling in some of these ideas, and you're never really going to get anywhere. It can be fun. That's okay if you're not trying to do it. But if you're just intellectually curious and you want to see it, that's all cool. But if you're going to build one of these projects, like, you got to eat this stuff, like, dream about it. And people might think you're a little crazy. They certainly did with me when I was, that summer that I was building this. They thought it was just like insane that I was spending all this money, and like, I was kind of a madman. But again, I think the results speak for themselves.
I can deeply relate to all of that. Kelvin had a question. I'll ask for him. Aramik also has a question. Aramik, you're jumping on camera though. But Kelvin's question is like, what do you think guests are looking for in these spaces?
I think that, there are trends that come and go in terms of like Instagrammable, where, and I see a lot of like this kitschy design kind of like experience. Again, terms can be misused and hijacked, but experiential, that's just really like, okay, so you have murals and a fire pit and some string lights. Cool. Those things come and go, but ultimately guests want to feel something they haven't felt, or they want to be reminded of something like from their childhood. They want to be transformed in some way. And so if you think of like the economic ladder of commodities at the bottom, to goods, to services, to experiences, to transformations, we're aiming for transformations. And so, hospitality and service is about, like, there's a great quote, I think Will Guidara said, like, service is what you do and is the thing you do, and hospitality is how you make people feel when you do it. And so if you can find the way, and I like to think of it in terms of hardware and software, to merge the software, which is that hospitality, that unreasonable hospitality, with the hardware, which is the experience and the physical, the built environment, the landscape, which again I feel incredibly strongly about. I think nature is the place where humans feel most alive. So if you can find a way to meld those two worlds into something just, again, seamlessly cohesive, it's going to make people feel something they've never felt. It's going to reconnect people with nature, with each other, with themselves. And so that's really what it's really all about, a feeling that you're going for, but you're using design and architecture and landscape and hospitality principles. You're using all those things to help you achieve that end, but those things are not an end in and of themselves. They're to contribute to a vibe and a feeling and an emotion, like a response, like the feeling that you have when you watch a film that's like really moving. You want to create that in the hospital, in the physical space, and in the experience they receive while they're there.
Yeah, I will also say Unreasonable Hospitality as a book is amazing. I found out about that because they were reading it in the Bear, which is also a great, like, if you want to talk about like unreasonable passion and focus, maybe unhealthy, but like shout out to the Bear. Aramik had a question. Aramik, you gonna jump on? Thank you.
Yes.
I'm a
Thank-
member. Oh, I'm
um,
a member, by the way. Yeah.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Sorry.
no problem. So, my partner Natalie, who's on right now, we actually designed a really incredible place in Costa Rica where we live, and we're crushing it on Airbnb. It's really gorgeous. Sunrise, sunset, monkeys, like as beautiful as it gets. But we haven't transcended Airbnb. And I think you have a really inspiring story of like moving beyond Airbnb, which is this very kind of limiting, and even the language of it, Natalie hates being called an Airbnb. I'm curious your advice, like once you have this gorgeous, incredible, inspiring place in nature, like we even have the same book as you, The Secret Life of Trees. I saw it in your video. That's on our coffee table too. Like I'll post it in the comments, but what's your advice once you've got this thing made, how to go beyond Airbnb and really create a special experience that allows you to have that direct connection with your guests and not get those Airbnb bookings anymore, but become a destination in and of itself? Like what do we do?
Yeah, great question. Well, assuming you have actually created something that is word of mouth worthy, I like to call it, that is not, in other words, that is non-commoditized, that's not just something else someone else can recreate. And design, landscaping, all of that, the hospitality itself, are ingredients for that. I would say storytelling is the number one skill. So I think that with the actual experience that people have when they're, again, we talked about the guest journey, like everything from when they first book, well, actually the marketing before they book on social media, and the content that you're creating, but all the way through their experience on site, and both the story of the property and you as the host that you're telling through the property, but also the platform, the stage that you're setting through your experience for the guest to have their own story on, and just have the guest can be the main character, but they have like the supporting cast and they have the right props and the right environment. I really think of it in those terms. You have to have those ingredients for story. So from a content perspective, there's a whole science to storytelling that works, and of course like playing the game as far as the algorithm is concerned, because you have to some degree. But I don't like to get, some of these folks get too carried away and it just becomes like, again, too kitschy and not tasteful, in my opinion, in the way that they create content. So there's a balance there of like cinematography with the correct amount of like lifestyle shots that show people in the space, again, kind of like reinforcing subconsciously that storytelling that you're trying to get the guest to feel immersed in. And all of this, again, it's setting the stage for the guest to feel that sense of like, oh, I want to go there. Like I think humans connect to stories on a very primal level, and trust is built through storytelling. So the direct bookings were a result of the stories that we told, that the influencers told, And there are so many opportunities to do that. But ultimately, like, this is such a multi-layered question. Ultimately, it has to be backed up and justified by a real bona fide experience on site. And so I think a lot of these people, again, kind of like are genius marketers, but they overpromise and they underdeliver with the physical experience. And there's plenty of properties that are probably in your category that don't try as hard on marketing because they're just relying on Airbnb. They have an incredible property. They have a good story. Maybe they're just not telling it correctly. And so when you can, again, find the right marriage of those two things, you have the ingredients for a brand. And a brand is just, it's the culmination of all of the touch points that people have with your property, digital and physical, and the level of affinity they feel with their friends, with the people in their circles of influence. And when you get all the pieces set correctly and you're producing content and guests are or potential guests are seeing that, sharing that with their friends, and it becomes, that's then juicing the algorithm, and then you're getting more momentum, and then you're reaching new people, and you have this beautiful flywheel. Those are the ingredients for pretty viral direct bookings. But yeah, there's a whole science to the way that both in the physical space you can go about storytelling, and in the digital space of like how you craft the content.
I love it.
Thank you.
Isaac, I would just because you and I talked about this. The other thing too is like you need people's emails. You got to get off the fucking platform. You got to get off the platforms. Don't let Instagram and Airbnb have all your emails.
100%. Like, emails are the most valuable channel in terms of platforms, because you can never be deep. You can't be deplatformed. You actually own that audience. And so that's the one thing Airbnb never wants to give up. But once assuming you have this story and you have this kind of experience, again, people already are going to want to come back because they feel connected to you and they feel connected to the property. Now you have that channel to facilitate it. And so literally we had people come back 4 times in 1 year and bring different people with them each time because we were able to communicate with them.
Yeah, love it. Okay, Jerome, you have your question.
Yeah, hi. Fantastic presentation. I never in my life thought I'd want to go to Deary, Idaho, I mean, but I want to go there right now. I was wondering in particular, because of the train, whether there's any, I just thought it strikes me as such a powerful way to preserve. And preservationism is such an important thing in certain places, and just the sense of history as being a part of a larger story. You're in this old-timey train and you're really connecting to history. Do you have any, I know the 6-month scope that you did that in, what wouldn't have made this possible probably, but like, are there any preservation organizations or kind of funding or things like that you've ever thought about pursuing or?
Oh yeah. Great question. So we were in too big of a hurry to really hunt that stuff down, but I was actually just in New York State a week and a half ago, and somebody who followed me on social media DM'd me, and it was perfect timing. And they had followed the train project. They had just bought an old train depot and a caboose. And so they took me out to see it. And she's actually been she's a year and a half into this plus, maybe more than that. But she did the research, and this old train depot, she's actually just now got the firm approval, but they basically got it listed on the National Registry of Historic Places, and which apparently is quite easy as long as like the building hasn't been moved or majorly modified. If it's over a certain number of years old, what that allows them to do is now qualify for this major historic tax credit. So they essentially get, between the state and the federal level, they get 50% of all restoration costs covered, refunded. And so, she had a consultant for that, and it took about a year to do that and to kind of lay that groundwork. But in that project, she's probably going to end up spending, she's scrappy. She'll probably end up spending about $500,000 to do that project. And so she's going to save $250,000+ on that. That's going to be totally written off. So historic tax credits, also like state and regional grants that are promoting, investment and development in underprivileged and kind of like, forgotten areas. She actually told me in that part of the state as well, she thinks there's going to be another opportunity. There was another hotel I looked at on the same trip in a little town in upstate New York. that a boutique brand actually just bought and renovated. They got $32 million of funding from the state to do that as part of a grant, because they're basically reinvesting into an underprivileged community. So yes, there's fantastic incentives out there, and that's actually one of the things that I don't spank myself too hard for it, because yeah, speed is another like super cheat code, because opportunity cost in terms of the attention and the bookings and whatnot, like that also factors in. But on my next project for restoration, I will definitely sharpen my pencil for.
I love it. So I think we're almost at time. Do you think we have time for one more question? I
Yeah, of
don't know
course.
if you're
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
All right, Khalik, you got this. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Let's see. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
You are on.
Perfect. Isaac, Josh, thank you so much. Just wanted to ask, what creative steps did you take to elicit that first impression for your Live Oak Lake property? Like you mentioned that many guests were saying after the fact, like that when I knew I was in a different place once I stepped, through that portal. Like, what steps did you take to develop that? If you don't mind going through that.
As far as like the built environment on site,
For that specific, I don't know if you were going for that, for the intentionality of that
Yeah.
specific place setting for that.
Yeah, so
experience?
there's a term called placemaking that anybody in like architecture will be familiar with, but basically it's like there's a whole school of like thought now around it, where on more of like a town building or a resort building, in this case scale, people think about like, how do you incorporate, again, nature and the biophilic design and with the built environment and walkability and activities, experiences for people. So there's a ton of like technical answers that you can research that I think we just kind of implemented intuitively without knowing it.
Okay.
But one of the favorite things for me in reflecting about it is first impressions, just in general. So, everybody knows that everybody judges a book by its cover, whether they should or not. And so I realized, like, especially that moment when people pulled up and that first 5 minutes of their experience needed to blow them away. And so, like, the front gate, for instance, I wish I had pictures I could show you, but like, I literally spent tens of hours geeking out about how I was going to design the front gate for maximum impact. I didn't want it to be too over the top, and it's all about expectation setting. I just wanted it to feel like and signal immediately like, whoa, something's different about this place. Like, there's a level of elevation here that you don't normally see. And so, like, we handcrafted this front gate with our logo, and we had the lighting set just perfectly, and we had the plants just intentionally how we wanted them. And then once people pull through the gate, the trees and the way that we curved the road, and it feels like you're kind of entering into this wonderland. And then the way that we had the signage and the way that we had the walking path from each parking spot up to the front door. And then all of it's leading to this moment where guests walk through the front door and literally are blown away. And so with the cabins that we had designed, it's this front of pure glass that's looking out on the water through the trees, kind of light filtering in through the trees. And all the sight lines are kind of pointing there, and you have, just very tasteful amenities and finishes. That is that wow moment where it's that shoot through moment, to use a content term, which also was very helpful from a content perspective, but where people walked in, it's like the momentum, the expectation has been building, and bang, you have a crescendo. And so the entire experience is incredibly important. And I like to say the way you do anything is the way you do everything. That being said, first impressions matter just a little bit more. And so applying that 80-20 principle to that guest journey on site was incredible. And like spending that extra 20% yielded a fantastic exponential result in the way people felt.
I love it. Okay, so I'm gonna give you your final sign off, but I want to sort of loop in one final question. Like, it sounds like you have a lot of like friends and connections and community in this space. Like, are there other places where these conversations are happening? Like, how can people get in touch with you? How can people be involved in this conversation elsewhere? I mean, obviously, I'm happy to keep this conversation going in future spaces, but give me a sign off and a takeaway for the audience here today.
Yeah, I really do appreciate you having me on, and just hopefully it comes across, but I'm super fired up about this, and I love talking to people who are as well, and you have a great group here. So I write a newsletter. I literally spend 6 hours writing a newsletter. It takes you 3 minutes to read every week, and I like to think of it as a community because I get so many replies from people, and I just break down candidly all the lessons I've learned. I link to that as well as my other socials. But what I would say is, there's a great Tim Ferriss quote. This is super meta, but I want to leave you with this, where he was like, there is a glut of mediocrity in the world. Please don't contribute to it. And what inspires me about what I'm doing and then seeing all the things, that your folks are doing is that really this transcends domains, and it even transcends creative domains. Like, I believe the principles that made Live Oak Lake what it was, and equally what these other projects have become, can be applied again by anyone, anywhere. And I really feel like for me, it's getting back to my roots of like, I was raised a certain way to prioritize craftsmanship and just a natural sense of hospitality and a sense of design, and really, to boil all of that down, a sense of care in what I was doing. And again, I think passion is the best magnet in the entire world. And so please don't contribute to the glut of mediocrity. Do something that only you were created to do. And whatever that is, wherever that is, you're going to not only have a great story to tell, you're going to live a great story, and other people are going to, like, literally, you can change people's lives just by the level of care that you put into your work, wherever you are, and the kind of intentionality that you craft these experiences for. So that's what I want to leave everybody with.
All right, Isaac, love it. I relate deeply to it. I think a lot of people on this call relate deeply to it. Thank you so much, man. This is really fantastic. This is exactly what I wanted it to be. Please allow me to help support you and help support the community. But also, man, just thanks so much for being here. We'll keep the conversation going.
Love it, Josh. Love everything you do. You're a great example of what I'm talking about. So keep on crushing it.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Isaac. Thanks everybody for being here. Hope to see you again next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.